Podcast.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and today, part 2 of stories about politics and politicians. I think I said this last time. Part 1, the first time we ran through this, episode 208, if you want to go check it out. And I think I said this last time. Like, I don't understand people who make politics like their entire personality and just like love politics, or like people who idolize politicians, right? And like the obvious one is like all the Trump people, but even like the people who like really idolized Obama. And I think honestly, like that's where it started, with like politicians like really branding themselves, where just like the giant hope poster or whatever, and it's just like, yeah, man, Obama's cool, but like I don't think we should be idolizing these people, because these are just regular people, right? Like and regular, yeah, kind of, I think, for the most part, a lot of these politicians are like lawyers, but it's people who have decided to make a career out of it, and that was their aspiration really early on, where it's like they go to college, they go to law school with, this aspirational plan of later becoming a politician, and so the vast majority of politicians are lawyers coming from a legal background of some sort, sure. But a lot of like, representatives are just like regular, ordinary people, and that's have you met people out in society? Just like, go to your local Walmart and just like walk around. Any of those people, well, not any, because a lot of them not born in this country, but a lot of the people in that Walmart could also be politicians. Just any random dingling could just decide to run for office. And if they're charismatic enough, because that's all you need. You just need to be charismatic and be able to woo people and get them to believe whatever nonsense you can get them to believe to get them to vote for you. And then you just gain all of this access and security clearance and insight and make decisions on how the country is run. And these people are so unqualified. So many of these, at least the representatives, and especially like at the state level, but even in Congress, are just so unqualified, so stupid and ethically bankrupt. And they're like you and me, and we let them do it. Because, well, it's not like we were going to do it. Not like I'm going to run for office. I probably have too many questionable tweets out there to run for office in this way. Too many questionable statements on this podcast, for sure. Like, God forbid I ever run for office and someone just combs through all 270 some episodes of this show and just pulls out so many out of context things that I have said. So many terrible things. I mean, just anything where I'm doing a Japanese accent, I'm done. I'm canceled for sure. I mean, none of it's terrible, but you know how society is. We like to be outraged and overreact, and because that makes us feel like we're doing something when we're not. Anyway, that's my political rant for today. I got 5 stories for you. We are looking at the lives of John Wilson, Manuel Herrick, William Langer, Eddie Haymour, and the Congressional Brawl.
Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time.
We are starting in 1836 when John Wilson was chosen to represent Clark County, Arkansas at the state's Constitutional Convention to create the state's first constitution. After being named president of the convention, he was then chosen to represent Clark County and then serve as Speaker of the House at the Arkansas House of Representatives. On December 4th, 1837, the House was debating whether or not bounties should be paid on wolf pelts because, I mean, look, Arkansas is still they're a brand new state at this point, and they didn't really have actual problems to solve yet, and so they had to spend their time debating whether wolf pelts needed to have bounties paid on them. Who knew? Well, Representative Joseph Anthony jokingly suggested that, quote, the signature of the president of the real estate bank be attached to the certificate of the wolf scalp. Now, that statement means nothing to any of us because we don't know how serious wolf pelts were back in the 1830s, but Wilson, who happened to be the president of the real estate bank, took offense to Joseph Anthony's remark, and Wilson quickly brandished a knife and stabbed Anthony to death right on the House floor. I honestly, I wish that would happen more. I wish in Congress right now, one of those dinglings would say something stupid, and then another representative would just haul off and just stab him right in the neck. Oh, that would be glorious. That's worth watching C-SPAN for sure, but it'll never happen. Not again. It clearly has happened once. It was a state level, but still. Although Wilson was arrested and sent to trial, he ended up lodging with the judge and even paid for the judge's meals, which seems like a thing you shouldn't be able to do when you're on trial for murder. But whatever. And then, unsurprisingly, he was found guilty of excusable homicide the following year and was released. Look, he was found guilty of murder, but that excusable part right there is a big deal. Just excusable homicide. And again, there are several, valid reasons that you could be, found guilty of excusable homicide, right? Like maybe someone breaks into your house and murders your kids, and then you kill that person out of rage. That is excusable homicide, all right? Someone cuts you off in traffic and doesn't give you the wave. Not excusable homicide, all right? I get it. It's frustrating, but not excusable. Same thing. Somebody making a little joke about your position as president of the real estate bank. Again, not excusable homicide. But whatever, he got off and he was released the following year. After the trial, after everything was settled, Wilson then took all of the jurors out for drinks, which again seems like a thing you shouldn't be allowed to do. But again, Arkansas, brand new state. Maybe they just didn't realize yet how courts and trials were supposed to go. Although Wilson was expelled from his House seat, he moved to the next county over and won the representative seat there. And then in 1842, he got angry again during a debate over the real estate bank and tried to fight Representative Lorenzo Gibson. This time, however, Wilson was subdued before he could murder anyone else. Following his tenure in the Arkansas House, Wilson moved to Texas and tried to win a seat in the Texas House, but was unsuccessful, and he later died in Texas in 1865. Moving on to February 4th, 1858, the 35th United States Congress was hotly debating the statehood of Kansas. The bill that was on the table would have permitted Kansas into the Union as a slave state and prohibited free black people from living there. Obviously, representatives from northern states weren't happy about this because they felt as though adding an additional slave state would make it harder to abolish slavery altogether, which is what they were really trying to do. As the debate continued past midnight, several members of Congress began drinking in an attempt to stay awake, which isn't how alcohol works at all, but whatever. I mean, look, alcohol is a depressant. Except for tequila, but I'm pretty sure they weren't drinking tequila. They were probably drinking whiskey, and that's a downer. All right. It's going to, calm you down, help you sleep, but whatever. I don't know. At 1:30 a.m., completely wasted, Democrat Lawrence Keat stood up and started yelling at Republican Galusha Grow from Connecticut. Keat had already been censured by the House over his involvement in the beating of Senator Charles Sumner 2 years prior. That we covered in the previous episode of this series when Keat got involved with Preston Brooks and Charles Sumner beating each other up. Keat was kind of like egging them on to let them beat the hell out of each other. And so he got censured for that. And it doesn't matter. Like, I don't really know what being censured means. It clearly doesn't do anything. And so Keat, he's yelling at Galusha Grow, and he says, quote, "You're a black Republican puppy." And then Grow, who was very white, he was not black, even though with a name like Galusha Grow, could go either way. Grow shouted back, quote, "No Negro driver shall crack his whip over me." Now, thanks to old-timey 1800 language like that, it's really difficult to tell who was being more racist in that exchange. Because, like, calling someone a black Republican puppy sounds more racist. And then Grow dropping an N-bomb. Granted, it was kind of the proper term, not the hard R. But again, I can't tell who's being more racist here. Pretty sure it's Keat, all right? Just given contextually, like I think he's from South Carolina. Grow being from Connecticut being anti-slavery, pro-black. Pretty sure it's, I can't tell. Regardless, when Keat lunged forward and threatened to choke Grow out, the entire chamber erupted into a brawl. Like, it wasn't even just those two, just everyone started fighting each other, drunkenly fighting each other. Speaker James Orr banged the House gavel several times in an attempt to restore order, but no amount of noise could stop the collection of 50 drunk old men from punching each other over black people, especially when one congressman interpreted the banging to mean grab your weapons, which is not, we've heard someone bang a gavel before. That never means, hey, go get your guns. It means, hey, can we simmer down a little bit? Well, they didn't. After several minutes, Representative Cadwallader Washburn, what a name, Cadwallader. Ooh, no one's naming their kids Cadwallader these days. We got to bring that one back, I think. Babe, I know you're listening. Think about it. Cadwallader Henson. It's got, look, it flows. Call him Cad, or call him Ladder. Wally, Cadwallader, whatever, man. Like, let's just think about it. All right. Anyway, he grabbed Representative William Barksdale of Mississippi and put him in a chokehold. During the scuffle between those two, Barksdale's hairpiece came undone and fell to the floor. And embarrassed, Barksdale quickly tried to put it back on, but then accidentally put it on backwards. And it's one of those like comical moments where like everybody sees this happen. And like everyone gets real quiet. And then after just like the slightest moment of silence, the chamber erupted in laughter as everyone realized how silly they were all being. Everyone then quickly just kind of dusted themselves off, returned to their seats, and continued the debate until they finally reached an agreement. And, for what it's worth, Kansas was later admitted on January 29th, 1861 as a free state. So the Union got what they wanted. Anyway, moving on to Manuel Herrick, who was born on September 20th, 1876 in Perry Township, Ohio. But his family soon moved out to Kansas, where he spent his childhood learning how to be a farmer because what else is there to do in Kansas? Rather than go to a tiny one-room schoolhouse on the prairie and receive whatever liberal agenda was being pushed on the kids at the time, Herrick was homeschooled, where his parents told him that he was the literal reincarnation of God, because that's the kind of things that they teach you in homeschool. They also refused to cut his hair because, I don't know, he was also Samson, the reincarnation of Samson. I don't know. That part isn't really clear. But because his parents fed his ego so much like that, Herrick would just openly disagree with preachers at church on Sundays and tell the congregation that only he knew the real truth and the proper way someone should be saved. And I get it, right? Like, if I told Finn every single day, like, Finn, dude, you are the literal reincarnation of God, I would totally expect him to then just go out and get mouthy with whoever preacher or evangelical Christian he came in contact with. Because that is the seed that I planted, and I reap that 100%. So this kid, this ego, and God, oh boy, how frustrating would it be to have been around this kid? So because he thought that he was God and could therefore do anything, Herrick also spent his teenage years setting his neighbor's fields on fire. And then he would get arrested for it, right? And then he would subsequently represent himself in court and then be genuinely surprised when he was found guilty of arson or whatever crime. He's like, Your Honor, I'm God. I can do whatever I want. I control fire. I controlled the fact that it burned up this dude's farm. I'm God. Laws don't apply to me. Well, they did. The final straw came when he attempted to rob a train, claiming that he was a member of a gang of outlaws who had told him to do it. When it was discovered that the gang only existed inside Herrick's weird little mind, he was committed to a mental institution. In 1893, at age either 16 or 17, he was moved out of his parents' homes and moved to Perry, Oklahoma, where he began raising cattle. He also made a habit of walking through town barefoot and eating food out of barrels in stores because, again, he's God. He can do whatever he wants. In 1920, Herrick decided to run for Congress, mostly because no one had even bothered to run against the wildly popular Dick T. Morgan. What a name. However, Morgan died of pneumonia on the final day that candidates could file their campaigns, leaving Herrick as the only remaining Republican nominee. And because Oklahoma hates the libs, he ended up receiving his district, or ended up winning his district, despite only spending $300 on his campaign and despite spending some time in jail during the election cycle, though historical records don't exactly specify why. But again, so now, of course he gets into politics, right? So this dude who claims he's God by just pure luck and a technicality wins this representative seat in Oklahoma. And so he goes off to Washington, D.C. And during his time in Congress, Herrick introduced a bill to ban beauty pageants because they were apparently extremely dangerous. And to demonstrate how dangerous beauty pageants were, he hosted his own beauty pageant and offered up marriage to a successful politician, i.e. himself, as the grand prize. The woman who ended up winning this pageant sued Herrick for breach of contract after he refused to marry her. Because, obviously she's so dangerous. Meanwhile, Herrick filed a lawsuit against his stenographer after she refused to marry him. Okay. A court actually ruled in his favor and awarded him 1 cent in damages. However, in a separate lawsuit, the court ruled in favor of the stenographer who refused to marry him and awarded her $7,500 because Herrick, quote, talked dirty about her. What is, you think life is really messed up today? This is the 1920s. And people got, Herrick lost a lawsuit. First of all, Herrick and this woman sued each other. Herrick won one lawsuit and was awarded 1 penny because, I don't know. And then the other lawsuit, he had to give this woman $7,500 because he talked dirty about her. Meanwhile, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial was some of the most graphic, moronic, just filthy smut in a courtroom like that. And that's where we are 100 years later. So, hey, let's cool it on. And again, this is why I do this podcast, man, just to show you that as crazy as things are now, not as crazy as they used to be. All right. We are actually, despite what the media tells you, things are actually getting a little bit better in a weird way. Anyway, after failing to win his re-election, Herrick was arrested in 1925 for moonshining, even though he was claiming to be an undercover IRS agent. This guy, man, he is God. He's a politician. He was in a gang of outlaws, and he was an undercover IRS agent. It's crazy. He tried unsuccessfully running for office several more times, even after moving to California in 1937. In 1952, Herrick disappeared during a blizzard while on a gold mining trip near the town of Quincy. His frozen body was found a month later in a snowbank 2 miles from his cabin. Moving on to William Langer, who was born on September 30th, 1886, near Castleton, North Dakota, before it was even a state. He graduated as valedictorian of his high school class, which, was probably only like 4 people, and then went on to graduate with his law degree from the University of North Dakota. Because he was actually still too young to practice law, Langer went to Columbia University and continued his studies before returning back to Mandan, North Dakota, and eventually starting his political career. In 1914, Langer was named the state's attorney of Morton County and then the state attorney general in 1916. However, Langer frequently clashed with the leader of the Republican Party, Arthur C. Townley, and accused him of Bolshevism. What is Bolshevism? I'm sure you were asking, and also I was, because I didn't know what it meant either. So basically, Bolshevism is a kind of a branch of communism along the Marxist-Leninist political thought and political regime structure that focused on a very rigidly centralized, very disciplined party of social resolution. So like it's like the opposite of anarchy, but with the same like goal, I guess, right? So like, whereas anarchy is just like no rules ever, even though anarchists have a ton of rules, Bolshevism was like, no, we have to do this a very, very certain way. And in general, like they wanted to overthrow the existing capitalist system and establish what is known as the dictatorship of the proletariat, which basically just means the working class, ironically, is the dictator of the thing. Anyway, the working class holds all the state power. Anyway, so Arthur C. Townley, leader of the Republican Party, is accusing William Langer of being this communist dude who wants the working class to rule the government. These disagreements usually splintered the Republicans in North Dakota because they were both Republican and limited their influence on the state's political decisions. So they were just hurting each other, and they were just spending more time fighting each other than actually getting anything done. By 1932, though, Langer had repaired the broken Republican relationships and was elected governor of the state. The following year, he then required all state employees to donate part of their salaries to the Nonpartisan League, which was this quasi-socialist faction of left-wing politics, and to The Leader, a weekly newspaper owned by officials in his own administration. Despite sounding super illegal and super unethical, this was actually a pretty common practice at the time for politicians to require state employees, administrative employees to donate parts of their pay to these various things. However, when employees of the state's highway department, who were also paid through federal programs, donated their portions, the U.S. Attorney for North Dakota, P.W. Lanier, claimed that the donations constituted a conspiracy to defraud the federal government and had Langer arrested. So basically, what all of that means is, Langer, he is forcing all state employees to donate this. Well, some state employees, based on what they do, are also paid by the federal government. And so when these employees were donating part of their pay, it was essentially as if the federal government was paying for these state programs, which is apparently fraud. I don't know. Langer and 5 others were convicted of fraud in 1934, and Langer was removed from the governor's seat. In response, he and 10 of his supporters quietly packed up his things from the governor's mansion, issued a formal apology, and retired from politics entirely, because that's what you do when you are convicted of a crime. You get out of politics. No, of course, that's not what he did. Langer claimed North Dakota as an independent nation, declared martial law, and barricaded himself in the governor's mansion until the Supreme Court agreed to meet with him and then make him governor of North Dakota for life. Whoa. How similar does that sound to what some people might do if they don't get their way? It's crazy. Langer's protest lasted for only a couple of days before he just kind of gave up and allowed Ole H. Olson to serve the remainder of his original term that he had won. Without a job to keep him occupied, Langer appealed the fraud conviction, and the case went to trial twice in 1935. In both instances, Langer was acquitted despite the judge bringing the case back up just because this judge hated Langer so much. Even more, Langer ran for governor of North Dakota again in 1936 and actually won back the seat. Langer then went on to win a Senate seat where he advocated for affordable health care for everyone, opposed entry to the United Nations, and lobbied to have the death sentence of Martin Sandberger, a high-ranking SS official convicted of crimes against humanity in Estonia during the Holocaust, reduced to just 6 years. This dude's all over the place, right? Like, affordable health care for everyone sounds great. We love that. Opposed entry to the United Nations. I don't know what his reasons were, but there are pros and cons of that. But then to argue that this SS official, this Nazi who committed crimes against humanity in Estonia during the Holocaust, to reduce his death sentence down to just 6 years in prison, what are we doing? Anyway, Langer continued to serve as a senator until his death on November 8th, 1959. Our final story here. In the early 1970s, Eddie Haymour fell in love with Rattlesnake Island, a small island on the opposite side of Okanagan Lake from the tiny town of Peachland, less than 20 miles south of Kelowna, British Columbia. Haymour thought the island reminded him of his home country in Lebanon and began his quest to build a Middle Eastern-themed amusement park on this island to teach Canadians all about Middle Eastern culture. That is a very Canadian-sounding thing to do. The park would include a giant pyramid, 2 different miniature golf courses, a 30-foot-tall camel statue that served ice cream from its belly, and, ironically, 0 rattlesnakes, even though it's Rattlesnake Island. While Haymour began construction on his park, the British Columbian government was not particularly on board with this idea, mainly because the residents in Peachland on the opposite side of the lake did not want a ferry in their town carrying tourists to an island amusement park, especially an amusement park that celebrated Muslims and brown people. Brr, gross. Anyway, that's their thoughts, not mine. To make things worse, British Columbia Premier William Andrew Cecil Bennett made closing the park part of his re-election campaign, and by denying every single permit Haymour tried to obtain, and even sent police to the park on opening day to prevent people from getting inside. This entire ordeal made Haymour literally go insane, and I get it, right? Like you have all of these good intentions, you build this giant amusement park, and on opening day, these politicians who hate you because, I don't know, they literally prevent people from getting inside by sending all the police out there. Haymour was ultimately arrested and charged with 37 different crimes, namely threatening to send a bomb to the British Columbia Premier Bennett in the mail. You can't do that. Although Haymour and his lawyers reached a plea deal with the British Columbian government, Haymour was forcibly institutionalized. After his release in 1976, Haymour went back to Lebanon, recruited 5 of his cousins, and then held 20 Canadians hostage with an AK-47 at the Canadian embassy in Beirut. As part of his negotiations, Haymour demanded the return of Rattlesnake Island, which he had been forced to sell at a huge loss, along with a proclamation from the Canadian government that he was not as insane as he was very currently making it seem like he was. After a few hours with no response from Canada, Haymour just gave up and released the hostages. He was then fined $200 by the Lebanese government because, hostage situation is just like a normal Thursday out there. And then he traveled back to Canada to sue the pants off of everyone he could possibly sue. And shockingly, he won a lot of these lawsuits. In 1986, the British Columbia Supreme Court ruled that the government had treated Haymour unfairly and wrongly institutionalized him. Haymour was awarded $250,000 in damages, but he never got Rattlesnake Island back. All right, part 2 of Pathetic Politics in the books. It's just ridiculous, like so many ridiculous things. But again, that's what happens when you give normal, unqualified people access to just really big, crazy decisions. So let's recap and see what we learned today. What did we learn? Number 1, John Wilson, representative in Clark County, Arkansas, just straight up murdered a dude on the House floor in Arkansas because he made a little jokey joke about his position as president of the real estate bank. What even is a real estate bank? I don't know. Arkansas. Number 2, there have been not one, but at least 2 giant fights in Congress, both of them involving Lawrence Keat to some degree. This one a little less violent than the first one where, Charles Sumner got nearly beaten to death. This one, just a dude lost his hairpiece and people started laughing about it. And then number 3, Manuel Herrick. Parents, listen, if you're going to homeschool your kids, it's fine. Don't tell them they're God. Because it's going to develop a complex and they're going to go around just doing whatever they think they can do because they think they're God. And then they're going to run for office. And that's just going to make things so much worse. What did we learn? Next week on the show, it's not the official start of
Summer calls.
But it's going to basically be a little appetizer, right? Like, we're covering the Elan School in Maine. Not technically a cult, but had just a very culty feel to it. Just a crazy story of this, basically like this boarding school that just messed a lot of kids up. So we are covering the Elan School next week. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird.
This is a podcast